Anytime.
Oftentimes when we do these things, and I'm reminded of an introduction, I'm reminded of an introduction I heard of years ago. A guy that was with me, a leadership Knox, will tell this story. It's the story of President William Howard Taft. William Howard Taft, when he finished his presidency, he did like all the presidents do. He did the speaking tour. And when he got on a speaking tour on this one particular occasion, he was being introduced by a senator from New York, and his name was Chauncey Depew. And Chauncey Depew, as most senators and most politicians, like to hear themselves talk. So during the introduction, he went through this whole elaborate spiel of Senator Depew and how and all the things Senator Depew, all with this whole thing of President Taft and what he'd done and how marvelous he was, and on and on and on. And finally, at the end of it, he says, "And now I present to you, pregnant with wisdom, pregnant with knowledge, pregnant with great words for all of us, President Howard Taft." And so, many of you may not know this, but Howard Taft was the fattest president we've ever had. He weighed something like 350 pounds, 5'11", 350 pounds. So he kind of waddled up to the stage, and he said, "If it is a boy, I shall name it George Washington Taft. If it's a girl, I shall name it Martha Washington Taft. But if, as I suspect, it is merely gas, I shall name it Chauncey Depew." As Bo said, we're going to tell a little bit of the history, and I'll start with my part of it. He can chime in and ask questions as you come about. We'll go into. I'll try to move through the history a little bit, and then we'll talk to you a little bit about what we think we do different that makes us successful in an industry where 80% of the people that enter it in the first year don't make it to the second year. And we've celebrated our 25th anniversary with Connor Concepts in March. This next March, we will celebrate our 25th year. So we'll talk about all we got here. But to start with, we're from Knoxville, born and raised in mostly in the Fountain City area to start with. I am the oldest of 4 children. I have a brother and we have 4 sisters. Went to Catholic high school, as Mike said, went to University of Tennessee. And at UT, we were paying our own way through school, so we decided to try out this new place that was in town it was actually called Jolly Ox. They couldn't, Steak and Ale was the name of the company, but you couldn't call it Steak and Ale in Tennessee because it had the name of an alcoholic beverage in it. So eventually they changed it. It was called Steak and Ale, but Steak and Ale was started by a gentleman named Norman Brinker, and we consider Norman Brinker the father of the casual dining segment of the industry. So many people got their start from Norman Brinker. Anyway, he started working as a server at Steak and Ale. Got out of school and decided I really like this business, and so I got into management with him. And this is at a time where, if they said, this is a completely different time now, if they said we need you in Birmingham on Monday, and this is on Friday, you're in Birmingham, and you move stakes, that's where you are. I moved around for quite a while with them, and then finally ended up in Dallas. Opened up a restaurant in Dallas, and then worked for a long time, worked for quite a while, three years in Dallas, Texas, and about 7 years with Steak and Ale. You want to talk about your start?
Well, I graduated from UT and was going to be an industrial materials salesman. Well, that sucks. I don't know if you were doing that. So I was talking to Mike. He goes, "Hey, come on, work with us. It's like a fraternity." And we'd both been in the same fraternity, Lamb Guy at UT, so I went, and there was a bunch, there was like 11 other guys that were already there, Rick Federico, Tasman, a bunch of different people had gone over there, so I went, well, that looks like fun. It was definitely like a fraternity, but it was like a 72-hour-a-week fraternity. You work 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, got 1 day off, but it was fun. So I went through that, and then I stayed on with them when Mike went with Regis's and started Grady's. I stayed on at Steak and Ale, and then ended up running the region in Atlanta. There were about 20 restaurants, Montgomery, Alabama, a lot of Alabama, Augusta, and all the way around in that deal. So then I begged enough to say, I'm ready to. Steak and Ale was going through a little bit of a downturn, and Mike was distanced enough away from direct supervision that they were able to say, come on over here. So, and I was a little bit of I was a minor partner with that group. And then when Mike decided to start, after we sold that thing, and they tried to get Mike to go to Dallas, and he realized that wasn't the deal, and he found out that instead of being in charge of everything and writing all the checks, they were going, Mike, you don't run this thing anymore. So, your ideas are not what we're really looking for. We got our own ideas. So he decided to bail out on that thing, and I was going, you know what? I could use another job. Bring me. So we got into that, we started into that deal. And really, as Mike was alluding to, I mean, the biggest thing about starting a restaurant and building it, and we had that at Grady's, and it's all about culture. It's all about building a team that's happy and you take care of your people. I mean, I've always said that, a lot of people have different philosophies about how to run, how to manage people and stuff. And I always said, you just don't have to be an asshole to get things done. I mean, you can actually be nice to people, and they'll work for you. And the culture was amazing. I mean, if I think about what's going on with us, for instance, culturally, of course, all our kids worked for us at one time. All my sisters worked for us at one time. Some of them better than others, but also the kids were about like that too. But I look at it and I'm thinking, through all this culture and what we built and everything, my financial advisor worked for us as a server. Our lawyer worked for us as a server at one time. The person that I would recommend as an oncological surgeon worked for us at one time. That's my daughter-in-law. Our food purveyors, my real estate broker, and a lot of kids and all the cousins. So we've got it's a family atmosphere, but the culture is what brings it. And they really, our team sells that whole culture. And it's something that has worked really well for us all. I'm jumping on everything. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. Just clear, as far as the history part, just as Bo said, we ended up, we had Grady's with the Reguses for about 7 years, developed that into 7 restaurants and in several states. And every place we went, we put a Grady's. We were the busiest restaurant in that city because it was a very successful concept.
Hey, Mike.
Yes, sir.
A lot of people know about Grady's and where your first location was down there at Paper Mill.
Paper Mill, where people.
I remember the 2.5 hour wait.
We had.
People stood there waiting.
The philosophy we started with Grady's is a lot what we brought on over to Connor Concepts, and that was, I mean, everything was pretty much under $10. Everything was made from scratch, and I mean everything. I mean, chef, when we made horseradish sauce, we took the root and we peeled the horseradish root, grinded it up, put all the stuff. I mean, everything was completely made from scratch. French fries were twirled, and then and we would have 2-hour waits on Tuesday nights. And we didn't take reservations, and we didn't take call ahead waiting. So people would come and put their name on the list, go home, change clothes, get their life shape, come back and eat dinner. I mean, that's the way it was. But so it was a big success story, and it's funny. A little this because this is kind of fun. So we did this, and my goal at that time was I wanted to do 14 restaurants in 10 years. That was the plan. And the Reguses, their only plan was we're going to do this one restaurant and make it work. And I said, no. I brought on some other people with me. One of them was Rick Federico, who is a fraternity brother also, and has just recently retired as the only CFO that P.F. Chang's ever had the whole time. So he did, 300, 400 P.F. Chang's. But we mentioned Norman Brinker. Norman Brinker was, as I said, the father of the restaurant industry, and he. I was with Bill Regus, and we were talking to Norman about. He wanted us to talk to Norman at a conference we went to see if he had any advice on how we should do more than one restaurant a year, because I needed to do that to hit my goal. And I didn't really know him that well at the time. He had been with Steak and Ale, but it was a big company. And so I did talk to him about it, and I told him what we were doing, told him what kind of sales we were doing. He said, interesting. Well, I don't have time to talk. Maybe we can do it another time. When you're in Dallas, let's talk. I said, well, we're going to be in Dallas next week for another conference. So we went to Dallas the next week for another conference, and I didn't even think about calling him up. At the end of the conference, Bill and I were getting ready to head back, and he said, you didn't call Norman Breaker up. And I said, well, first of all, I might just don't take my call, but whatever. I called him up, and they said, oh yeah, we're waiting for you to come. We thought you were going to come by. I said, can you come? I said, well, we got about 2 hours before we got to get to the airport, but sure. So we get up to the office, and he's there with 4 people. He's got our menus laid out on a table, and he said, we figured out the best way for you to grow at 2 a year is to do it with us. We want to buy you. So we walked out and said, what the hell just happened? We just got lucky. So anyway, so they bought us, and then from there, ran it for a couple more years, and then it was obvious that I wasn't going to be able to stay in Knoxville. We were going to have to move to Dallas again, and didn't want to do that. So that's how the idea of Connor Concepts came about. And the thing, like Bo says, so it's really, it is about culture, and it is about taking care of people, and it is about making sure that you have to have a foundation. I've had a lot of people ask me, how do you manage 1,300 people? And I mean, we got 100 managers and 16 restaurants in 6 states. I mean, how do you do that? Well, you have to start with a good foundation. And I put together, for the first 2 months when I was by myself here, before everybody came on board with me, started this out, put together our 10 foundational beliefs. And we live by those foundational beliefs. And it includes things like environment and perspective. And the environment says one thing, and we want this thing to be fun. We don't want you to come in thinking that you're going to work. I tell the story a lot of times. I consider myself a good finder. That's what I mean. Everybody can find things that people do wrong. The idea is to find things that people do right and to accentuate that and to build that up. Get that in Andrew Carnegie, the Carnegie that had there was Andrew Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie had at one time in the early 1900s something like 10 millionaires working for him, and this is a time when you have 10 million working. Go. At least it's the right song anyway. Even louder. Anyway, Andrew Carnegie had something like 10 millionaires working for him. People ask me, how the hell did you hire 10 millionaires? I didn't hire 10 millionaires. Well, how did you develop these guys to become millionaires? And he said, you develop people the same way you mine for gold. You have to turn through tons and tons of dirt to find a single ounce of gold. But you don't go looking for the dirt. You go looking for the gold. And that's what we try to impress upon people. We try to make sure that the people that come into our place want to work there and enjoy work there, which I guess I'll tell the other story. There's another story that we use all the time, and we always say, we want them working for the railroad, which the story on that is, and this is a story I heard years ago, and I've used 100 times, and all of my people can tell it to you.
You ask anybody else. Am I going to tell the railroad story?
I have to set a scene. It was a hot day in some Midwestern area, and the sun was really beating down. And Dave Anderson and his railroad crew were out working on the roadbed. And they say in the hot summertime with the sun beating down on the steel and the tar and the gravel, it really does get really hot. Well, they noticed that a train came off and pulled off to the side, and they noticed that the last car on that train was a rather elaborate, handcrafted car. And as a train came to a stop, a window rolled down, the voice came out and said, Dave Anderson, is that you? And Dave wiped his brow and said, well, it sure is, Jim. So come on in here, let's talk for a while. It sounded like a good idea, getting out of the hot sun, getting that air-conditioned car. And he went in there and he stayed for about an hour, and when he came out, the men could see him warmly shaking hands with Jim Murphy and telling him how much he'd enjoyed the visit. And when he came back, the men gathered around and said, Dave, wasn't that Jim Murphy? They said, yeah, it sure is. I said, well, Jim Murphy is the president of the railroad. And he said, that's right, he sure is. Well, how is it that you happen to know Jim Murphy, the president of the railroad? Well, to tell you the truth, a little over 20 years ago, Jim and I went to work with the railroad on exactly the same day, and we've been friends ever since. And they said, well, no, wait a minute. Yeah, I went to work with the railroad on the same day. How come you're still out here in the hot sun? Jim Murphy's president of the railroad. And he kind of hung his head a little and said, well, to tell you the truth, a little over 20 years ago, I went to work for $1.75 an hour, and Jim Murphy went to work for the railroad. Our people work for the railroad, and we hire only people to work for the railroad.
Yeah, and when I first heard that story, I went, well, yeah, that's nice, that's kind of hokey, but I tell you what, I tell you what, since then, and I've raised my children on this particular theme, because if you look at it, and I was watching the news one time, there's a guy out there, and he's 50 years old, and he's working for minimum wage at McDonald's, and they're saying, you know, this is an awful deal. You know, it doesn't make enough money. They should pay, McDonald's should pay more, and the whole deal. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? If that guy's 50 years old and working for minimum wage, he either just got out of prison and is doing, or he's just not working right. If he'd started working at 18 for McDonald's and working for McDonald's, he'd be a manager now or a supervisor of a bunch of restaurants. You got to go out there and make sure the team, the company is getting better every day, and that's what you do. You make sure they're getting better every day, and if they are, then the sky's the limit. And it plays out in every one of our managers and managing partners. I mean, all these guys have been with us forever. Our area directors literally worked with us at, some of them at Steak and Ale, but certainly at Grady's, and have come through. And there's a 25-year history with us, and all of our managers, our people stay with us because there's success in it. They can continue to climb. All our managing partners are in the, you know, six-figure salaries and up.
Well, the other good thing too is that and this is part of the culture thing, is that we have 100 managers that work for us. Maybe 2 didn't start as a server, a real person. We basically farmed our own people. Yeah. And that's why we only want to do 1 restaurant a year at the most, because that's 5 managers that we have to bring in each time and put them in. But, you know, if you do, like a lot of them do, like, first of all, we're privately held, and I'm not gonna do 5 restaurants a year because it costs too much. But still, you know, if you do 5 restaurants like a lot of them do, that's 15 managers that we got to have, and that's just something that we can't bring out from within.
It starts diluting the people. So, you know, they've all come up, and we look at them, and when we've gone outside, we often find different cultures from other restaurant groups, and they come in and they're not expecting to. First they go, wow, this is a lot of work, because our people work hard. But it's also just the culture change is sometimes hard to bear, and a lot of them wash out because they're expecting to just come in. Corporate office does everything. I don't have to do any thinking. I just open the door, shake hands, kiss babies, and move on. Well, it's not that easy.
Anyway, we have, we'll open this up for questions here, but we have, we're in 6 states. We have 16 restaurants. We have 12 shop houses and 4 Connors. And what's the difference between Chop House and Connors? You can see it here. Connors is probably a little more upscale. It's polished casual, we call it, as is Chop House for the most part too. Connors will fit in more higher income and heavily populated areas. The most recent ones we've been doing have been Connors, and one of the reasons is it does about $2 million more than a Chop House does right now in sales, or maybe more than that. So yeah, 2.5. So. And it's a little bigger, nicer building right now. But the Chop Houses are doing great for us, and in fact, our busiest one's in Kingsport, Tennessee, as a matter of fact.
2nd restaurant we built.
Yeah. So, anybody have
questions?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Rhonda.
Any idea how many employees, when you celebrate your 25th next year, how many you have that have been with you?
Well, that's funny you should say, because when we did our 20th back in 12, we had we invited a lot of the original people that we knew of that we could get a hold of, and we had a crowd that came in for just a celebration. We took a picture of it. It was a big picture, but I mean, every day I'm bumping into who I was with. And being introduced to somebody the other day that said, "Oh, we got this new person working for us." And I thought, "Oh, okay." I know it was. It was at the thing at Cherokee the other day with Randy Boyd, and somebody came up to me there and said, "Oh, here's I think it was Dougal McLaughlin, as a matter of fact. This is a person working for us right now." And I said, "Oh yeah, nice to meet you." He says, "Well, you know me. I mean, I worked for you for 3 years at Chop House and whatever, and Smokies." And so it happens all the time. We bump into people that, like Bo said, you know, John Brock worked with us at one time, and all these people that used to, that were actually doing business with in other fields work with us. And that's the other thing.
You say
Yeah.
is, you go back to them and they say, boy, we learned so much
Yeah, right.
about how to work, how relationships and how to work with people and the teamwork aspect and all that stuff. So most of our people are going to leave. You know, we don't hire servers that are professional servers. It's not like a New York deal. So most of these people have a different career, but they're making money as we did when we were going to school, to pay for school, pay for apartments or whatever else. And it's something that their goal is to be a doctor, lawyer, Indian chief, but you know, they get a great background. Yes, sir.
Funny story, we're talking about Brady's and how popular the place there on Peppermill was. And we were 2.5 hours away from the chocolate bar cake.
It's my wife's recipe.
That was a big deal. And so when you're snowed like 4 inches, we've been trying to get in. Tell my wife, let's go down there now. Nobody's going to be there on a snow day, you know. We go down, I let her out of the car, we go in, 2.5 hour wait. It's 4 inches of snow.
That's great.
But we waited.
Yeah, good. We're glad you're waiting.
The chocolate bar cake was actually it's my wife's family recipe, and in fact, she says, "Boy, I should have gotten copyright on that." But it was one of those things where we were first trying to doing menu testing. I brought that out and said, "Why don't we try this?" And she said, "Nobody's going to want that. I mean, you're going to want like a cake made with chocolate bars in it." It was very popular. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So Mike, since you were around both of you, actually, that you merged with Bill Regas.
Yeah.
And, you know, most of the folks in the room probably from here, but maybe not. But what did you learn from Bill Regas and the history he had of his team and all that? Maybe speak to that a minute.
You know, the things I really learned, the things I learned in the restaurant industry as such, the majority of it I got from Steak and Ale. The Regases there was a lot of there's some recipes and various things like that they did. The biggest thing I got from Bill was how to run a business. I mean, at Steak and Ale, we had somebody else that handled all of the legal stuff and the accounting stuff, and I mean, all I did was just, you know, I ran the restaurants. Now all of a sudden, you got to deal with architects when you're building. You got to build with attorneys, with accountants, and Bill had it buttoned up. It was every, you know, the 10th of the month he had all of his checks that he has, his bookkeeper had all out for him to sign each one of them. And, you know, I watched all that and I did that for a while. And the other thing too is Bill is his relationship with the guests and his ability to greet guests and remember their names and make them feel important. That's something that I aspire to do all of the time. He's the best at that, no question. I meet with Bill at least once every other month for lunch still, so and he's always got his advice.
Something I was going to mention. So people ask me often how the relationship is between me and Mike. Mike being the boss, and we're Irish twins, 15 months apart. So. That's Irish twins. So, you know, people, and I tell the story, I said, well, here's kind of how the relationship goes, because we're 3/4 Irish on our grandparents. You know, there are 3 of them, out of 4 of them were Irish. So there's a little bit of stubbornness in that deal. So we have heated arguments about differences of opinion. So we were doing that one day. And it was back and forth, and I was making some really good points. And so Mike says, he stops and goes, okay, here's the deal. We're going to do it this way because I said so. And I said, well, God, if you'd have led with that, this thing would be over. So,
This is a good point because I can be passionate at times, but I come up with a lot of the ideas. Those is more conservative and pragmatic, and the combination works really well together because I'm ready to go, and he says, no, let's talk about this for a minute, and it works very well. And I have been very fortunate to be able to work with my brother for as long as I have. There's a lot of times that relationship doesn't work out very well. This one has. We've got, and again, it's because we've surrounded ourselves with an incredible team. How do I run 16 restaurants all the time? Soon to be 7. We got one under construction in Sarasota, Florida, right now. Well, I got him watching over operations for me, and we've got area directors who are terrific. And basically, I get to as many restaurants as I can in a month, but it's to pat them on the back, ask what we can do for them. They're always scared to death, but I'm not there to criticize or to any of them. Now, their area directors might hear something if I see something wrong, but for the most part, they're just they like to see me because we take care of them. Yes, sir. Yeah, Charlie.
You talked about your business and food, but you know you have created a lot of other things too. To give you an example, I didn't know those were your restaurants, but I was an outside salesman. I closed a lot of deals with your restaurants. And I tell you how much it was when I finally got out and the company let me know when I retired. It was over $250 million worth of deals. Not all of them were interested, but a lot of them were.
The better ones were.
This is a but. Every time you got a fact, you talk to me, somebody says, but there was something else that you did in my life. Didn't know and met you just today. December 27th, I will be celebrating my second anniversary with my second wife. Everything's going fine, and you're still good. So thank you all. See your matchmaker and your deal maker.
Oh, hey, I can tell about being matchmakers. I have got so many, even of my area directors right now, who met their wives, and I mean, we've helped populate a good portion of it. I have one time Rick Federico, the P of Chains fraternity brother I had. Rick I introduced him to his wife. He was working with Steak and Ale with me, and actually I was working there, and I brought him on. And Peggy, his wife, was working as a greeter there. And I told Rick, "You're gonna like this as a greeter. She's really attractive, really gorgeous." And I basically, we were going out to dinner with my wife, and I were going out to dinner, and I basically challenged him in a not very pleasant way to ask her out, and he did, and then they were married like 8 months later. So fast forward to like a couple of years ago, his son is a real estate guy that works with us, and we're in Tampa, Florida or something, and being introduced, and we introduced him to one of the developers there, and he said something about, we've known each other for a long time. I said, yeah, if it wasn't for me, he wouldn't even be here. Whoa. He introduced my parents.
Well, my son, Mike's daughter, 2 of my sisters all met their spouses at the restaurant. Servers. We hire really good-looking people. And they sometimes like each other.
From a training perspective, what do you do differently than other restaurants with your servers, and your wait staff?
Well, it's got to be a detailed program, and you have to put a commitment into it. You start out by hiring the right people. People come back and say, "Gosh, how did you train these people to be so happy, so pleasant?" You don't. You hire them that way. Their parents did that.
Yeah.
You just got to take care of them afterwards. So you got to hire the right people, and then you've got people who want to work for the railroad, and then you have to have a program that's set up that they've got to put their time in. We give them their book manual to come back. They come back the first day and they have a test to start with. Did you really put any effort into this thing? And then they go through, for a server, they go through the steps in order to be able to move on to that step. So that's what we have to do. And management people have to do the same thing.
Well, it ratchets up to for management. We have a Connor Concepts University where we bring them in and do some seminars and different things with them. Especially important is we've got what we call a situational seminar, where we go through different scenarios and say, okay, you're the manager, what do you do in this case? What happens when this happens? And it's all about taking care of guests and thinking through those things and the philosophy that you can't treat unequal people equally. So, I mean, a lot of people think, this is a consistent thing. This happened, so the punishment should be the same. Well, one person may be a marginal, not doing very well. The other person may have a lot of deposits in the bank. So you can't treat unequal people equally.
I wanted to say, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, we've had a few accolades recently given to us in some of our restaurants. The Connors, pretty much every one of we have 4 Connors, and every one of them are in well, 2 of them are the tops in their markets by TripAdvisor. And our Huntsville restaurant, which is the busiest restaurant we have, which is actually run by John Sheridan's son Patrick, and he's been with us for, gosh, over 10 years, 12 years.
Our busiest
and it's our busiest restaurant. 2 years ago, it was named by Business Insider the #1 steakhouse in the state of Alabama, and they named all the steakhouses per state. Like in Georgia, it's Bones, and in Florida, it's Burns. But so #1 steakhouse, and this year they were again named to that position too. And Open Table just told us last week, this was reported in Forbes, that Connors in Huntsville was named one of the top 100 steakhouses in the country by Open Table. So it's that is a real tribute to Patrick and what he's done. And actually the one in Turkey Creek was named the #1 one in the state of Tennessee by another publication as well too. So we're proud of those distinctions.
Patrick made his wife a Connor.
Oh, yeah. Another success story. Yes, sir.
Culture, and the concept of culture gets a lot of airplay in business press, but in reality, most of us find it fairly difficult to crack. So we're going to have a culture in an organization, whether we're intentional about it or not.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit more? You talked about foundational beliefs, you talked about training. What are 2 or 3 of the other hallmarks of what you did intentionally for culture to get where you are today?
As I indicated before, a lot of it just has to do with your attitude toward them. And again, it's being a good fighter. It's standing up for that person when they've made a mistake. When some people may fire them, instead you bring them back and say, you're doing this great. Come on, let's get with this. And all of a sudden now they screwed up and they know that they could have gotten fired, but you supported them and you're on their side. I think that, and it has to start with hiring and developing the right management people. And of course, since they all came from within, we're able to watch their attitude all the way through. And then from there, they take care of the team. A lot of people say that the guest is #1. And you always treat the guest has got to be #1. We maintain the team members are #1. If you make your team #1, they'll make sure the guests are #1. The guests may be always right, but make your team #1, and then you support them, you stand by them, and I think that's what has a lot to do with it.
The other thing, to piggyback on that, you said culture. Our team owns the culture, and if somebody doesn't blend in with it, they get washed out. And it's real easy. They're challenged to do better, and if they're not, then they end up leaving because there's so much pressure put on them to be a team player and to work with everybody.